So, hello everyone. Welcome to this week's installment of ClueCon Weekly. This week with us we have Dave Stokes from Oracle, who is the community manager for a very important project you've certainly heard of, which is named MySQL. Thank you, Dave, for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me. Let me adjust this a little bit.
Of
By the
course.
way, that's my dog Boo in the background. She gets 10% of my fee. So,
Oh, good. Hi.
Boo, you gonna say hi?
Cool.
No, she's too busy. Well, thank you for having me.
Oh well, thank you for joining us. So
Yeah.
I don't know. There's a few places we can start from, but the most important question I have is how hard is it to manage a community the size of MySQLs? Because it's not. I mean, we're used to the Friswitch stuff at SignalWire, which is a lot of users, but that there's more in the
Well, the best way I could make an analogy is imagine you're on a TV game show and they're asking you, what's the number after two? And you know that. And then someone will say, who's the current head of the United Nations? And you know the answer to that. And then someone comes out with something from the quantum physics field where you're not even sure they're actually speaking real words. They're just kicking mumbo jumbo, and they're expecting you to have an answer. That is kind of my life because I have people who say, "Hey, how do I do this in MySQL? How do I do this in MySQL?" And then something comes out of left field. I should probably use a non-U.S. sports analogy. Something comes onto the pitch from out of nowhere, and you're supposed to be able to handle it. And a lot of times, I'm lucky that I can. Other times, I'm real lucky that I have a great support staff behind me. All those folks at MySQL, everyone in the organization is very helpful. And if you have a question and they can answer it, they will help you. So,
that's yeah, that is certainly very important to have.
matter of fact,
Uh,
this morning there was someone on Quora. Let me read you the exact quote if I can.
of course.
It basically said, I want to make sure I get this exactly the way the person wrote it. The question this morning was about database design. How do I choose the color of a database?
Oh, but,
Yeah. So
uh,
that's that,
so
that's how the job is. I have somebody who's asking how do we replicate between data centers across an ocean, and the next person wants to know the color of the database. So
And so, for the audience, what is the answer to that question?
whatever you want it to be.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that's great. That's absolutely fantastic. I was thinking some of those shades of purple, but not very vibrant, like a little bit muted purple, that kind of thing. That's always elegant, right? It's nice to look at, but not too annoying. Certainly
Hopefully.
works. Cool. Yeah. So that is that. Okay. That goes in the annals of one of the best questions I've ever heard asked
Yes.
for about this kind of thing. Great. So that's a super good starting point. I mean, there, there's not much that's more fun that we can bring up. That what color should the database be? So cool. So you're in MySQL. MySQL, as we know, has had I've been a user of MySQL for I don't even know. I don't remember not using MySQL, which makes it makes it interesting. But there was a switch at some point. MySQL was born as a pure open source project. Quote, it still is. Before people jump at me, we have the same problem with Friswitch, right? It still is, but it was born as as a volunteer, let's call it, type of open source project, and it then became sponsored by Oracle. First of all, is sponsored the right word? And second, what happened in the community around that change?
Okay. Originally, MySQL was an open source product under the GPL version 2. The community edition of MySQL is still an open source GPL version 2. If you want to go out and get the source code off GitHub or download it from our repositories, it's still out there. During the days of MySQL AB, under the leadership of the wonderful Martin Mikos, we started offering enterprise add-ons, better backup tools, better management tool, and all that. And those had a subscription cost, and that has continued on to this day. That's our enterprise edition. And recently, in the past year, we've added the MySQL data service in the Oracle Cloud, which is something that we can talk about a little bit later. But MySQL's always had the dual license where you can get it for free and there's add-ons that you can get from us if you want. Now, what was interesting is I was MySQL AB. I was hired as a PHP developer in the old certification group, and eventually became the manager of that group. And we've got purchased by Sun Microsystems, which was a big shock.
All right. Yeah, you're right. I even forgot about that step.
Yeah, and I mean, they literally had the first all hands meeting in Orlando, Florida, and they wanted us in the room 5 minutes early because they had something big going on at the top of the hour. And we thought, well, they're announcing the IPO or something like that. No,
Hmm.
they're announcing that we were bought for $1 billion. So we were the first open source unicorn. And uh, Sun came in, and to say that Sun had no idea what they were going to do with us would be an understatement. And then a
Oh wow.
year and a couple months later, I was at the MySQL Users Conference in Santa Clara, California. 6 a.m. when I turn on the TV, and there's Channel 2 News saying, "Big news from the Silicon Valley. Oracle has purchased Sun Microsystems." And that was a real big shock for a lot of us because we'd always been taught that Oracle was evil. Oracle was, wanted to kill MySQL. Well, they've had us for just about 11 years now.
Hmm.
And having been around Oracle long enough, I can tell you if we weren't making money, we wouldn't be here. If we weren't increasing our market share, we wouldn't be here. What was real amazing is that Oracle came in, took a look at our product. And by the way, we're not the number two database at Oracle. We're like number 11 or 14. There's several other databases out there. Times
Really?
10, times 10, the old Berkeley database, a whole bunch of others out there. But recently, in the last couple of years, we've really benefited from having Oracle as the big brother. They came in, looked at our engineering practices, and said, "You really need to improve here. You need a little more rigor here. You need better documentation here." So they have been amazing stewards of the MySQL product, which led to kind of the big thing about 4 months ago. MySQL on the Oracle Cloud infrastructure. We offered this is something you do have to buy a subscription for, and we are competing on price. So we are guaranteeing we're going to be cheaper than AWS, Google, or whoever else you want out there. Uh, we announced HeatWave, which is a fast analytics engine. It's compatible, well, comparable to Snowflake and several other compute engines out there, but
Hmm.
we're faster and lower cost, and also has a machine learning package on top of that helps configure things better. Also with that, we also offer high availability. So you click one button, you suddenly have a 3 node cluster running for you. That has been a big surprise because the customers have been flocking in to run MySQL on the Oracle Cloud. So I must say, I'm an old dinosaur. I like being able to go over
Hmm.
and touch my computer. I have one over here that I'm actually. The cloud is kind of this amorphous thing, but it's amazing the number of folks that are getting on the Oracle Cloud infrastructure to run MySQL, and the results they're getting from the products are amazing. So MySQL is everywhere in just about every form. We're on the cloud. We're on your own premises. You can get us off GitHub. You can get source code. We have just repos for just about every operating system out there. So it's kind of a broad base. And besides that, it's just not the database server. It's our shell product, which is a command line interface that speaks Python and JavaScript in addition to MySQL. You can save your own scripts in there. It also has some backup utilities that are, for the first time, having me getting rid of MySQL dump. We have
Oh
MySQL
wow.
route.
Really?
Yeah, it is amazing. We also have MySQL Router, which is a lightweight proxy. So your application talks to the proxy. The proxy knows what's behind the imaginary firewall that is your cluster. So your application doesn't have to know that there's 3 to 9 boxes out there. It just has to know how to talk to the router, and the router is very lightweight. We have other tools out there. The Enterprise Edition has a whole bunch of interesting stuff from at-rest encryption to better backup tools to performance monitoring. We have our connectors out there. We're also redoing a lot of our replication stuff. In the past, if you set up MySQL replication, it's a lot of tedious typing. Well, one of the real interesting things that we've borrowed from the InnoDB cluster arena is the clone plugin. It literally does a bit by bit copy of your InnoDB table space from a donor system to your new replica. So if you've had to do the old back it up here, FTP it over, unpack it, and then load it up stuff, you'll find this much, much, much faster. So every time I turn around, there's something new coming out the pipeline. So it's an amazing company to work for.
Super nice. Great. So yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. So where to start? Uh, so with the tool, most of the tools you mentioned are not open source, right?
Most of them are. The
Oh, nice.
servers out there open source. The
What?
shell, the connectors,
Mhm.
router. I mean, if you really want to go look at it, you can. Um, the funny thing is, if you take a look at the source code for the open source version and the source code for the community or for the enterprise version, at the server level, they are pretty much the same except for the copyrights. So,
Oh, cool. Yeah,
yeah.
that's pretty important.
Mm-hmm.
Great. So, what else? I'm thinking about. So you mentioned that the community didn't react. So you were inside, but the outside community, how did they react to the various acquisitions? Was it a lot of
Oh,
work to keep people from killing each other and you and, or was it something that was a little bit more amicable because people, it's still people. People are still people, which is
there's always the sky is falling, Chicken Little approach. A lot of people were real nervous. Oh my God, Oracle has this database. They're going to make us do all these horrible things. No, Community Edition's out there. It's been almost 11 years. There was a lot of folks who were kind of, wait and see. And I think they've been rewarded that Oracle has done a lot and the product is much, much superior than it was even in the 5.5 days. I mean, 8.0 has a lot of amazing features, like the data dictionary. It used to be before, if you went to your user lib MySQL and you did an ls minus l, you saw a bunch of FRMs, MYDs. Well, that was your metadata, and we kept those in little files because 25 years ago when MySQL started, that was a thing to do. Well, the only trouble with that is it chews up inodes. Those files look awfully attractive to a junior Linux admin who's trying to clean up table space, and it's better if we keep everything in the database. We learned through replication that point-in-time recovery information kept in the database was really, really a good thing. So putting the metadata in there is a good thing. So that also means, since you're not tying up inodes, that you can now have millions of tables within a database. The bad news being is that you can now have millions of tables within a database. Uh, People usually give around 20, 22 million, but that's just one of the hundreds of changes in MySQL 8.0 that have really made a big change. Hash joins. This is something that was, I believe it came out in 8.023 or 8.020. I had some friends that had some Equa joins that were coming through that suddenly were running a lot faster, enough faster that they were really concerned, and they ended up watching what was going on. That's something that just turns on by itself. We added contention aware transaction scheduling, which came out, I believe, at the University of Michigan. If you have a bunch of contentious rows, hot columns in a table, how do you service everyone trying to go after that? Well, this is an algorithm that switches on at about a 30% system load that knows how to prioritize those. So your more demanding queries get serviced faster and the data is returned to you faster. Uh, just a whole bunch of really neat things in there.
super interesting. Yeah, so so let's keeping into the spirit of the community before we go into a few more technical questions.
Uh-huh.
There's at least one major fork of MySQL out there,
Mm-hmm.
which you probably know about. uh, do you think that came out of political view, or is it something more about technical stuff? Like, does it actually do things that MySQL doesn't?
They have a few features that we don't have. We have a lot more features that they don't have. I was very glad to see that they got functions like JSON table, which lets you take your unstructured JSON data and temporarily turn it into a structured table. I was going through their Jira as they were trying to pull that through, and it was just heartbreaking to see the where they were stubbing their toes, but they do have it. Now, their approach is a lot different than ours. A lot of the decisions that we make on new features come from what the customers are asking us for, and we do listen to our customers. We also take contributions. That's something that we don't stress enough, but we do get plenty of contributions every year, and our customers kind of direct where we're going. We have well over 500 engineers, and I couldn't name the number of people. We've roughly sextupled in the 10 years since Oracle took us over. So that should kind of get rid of the idea that Oracle is going to end MySQL.
Well, I think that idea is over by now. At least if you ask me, like it's clearly not happened. It gave them 10 years and it didn't happen yet.
Yeah.
It's kind
It's
of like
interesting.
those conspiracies where they say they're gonna halve the world population, and then you realize it has grown by like 30% in 10 years, and you say, well, if there is a conspiracy, it's not working, so whatever.
Well, ironically, when I was in college, I had a friend whose dad was the last systems programmer for Singer computers, RCA. He eventually did a bunch of stuff for NCR mainframes. So there is a market in dying technology if you want or are willing to base your career on that. But that's not what MySQL is.
Oh yeah, I
Uh,
I have
it,
friends making five figures on servicing AS400s from IBM that were they're just literally the only person that's still alive that knows how to program one. So that commands a premium, apparently. See?
well, I will admit that when I was working for a company called Xerox, I actually bought an AS400 and was very impressed because that was a solid piece of machinery. Unfortunately, everything's in the cloud these days, so those were the good old days.
Yeah, well, that's I don't miss the good old days. I'll be honest. I'm happy with my replicating stuff, and so I do have a question that actually came up in a discussion recently with a customer of Second Wire, which might sound silly. Uh, Heroku does not have a MySQL offering.
Hmm.
Can you recommend something that would be alternative to a MySQL offering on Heroku? I know it's completely out of left field, nothing to do with open source, nothing to do with technology, but I have you here and I've been asked the question. So I guess.
This is kind of like asking a basketball player about who's the best fielder in the English Premier League. I couldn't really give you a decent answer or an educated one, so I'd like to back away. However, I will tell you that our on-disk encryption or at-rest encryption now works with the Heroku encryption manager.
Oh, cool. So
So,
yeah, so
so there's a little bit of
it is
interweaving there, but
coming around in a sense.
yeah. So
Well, then I think we have ourselves a good starting point.
yeah.
In that case. Great. So what else? Yeah. So what's in store for MySQL coming up next on the open source side of things? What's the when I meet someone from the community, a community manager from a large project, I like to ask you a near future feature, and then if you have something that's gonna come 3 years from now because things are just not ready, if there's something super great that you can tell us about, that would be fantastic to hear.
Well, on all my slide decks where I'm talking about MySQL, I have to put up what they call the Oracle Safe Harbor Agreement. Basically says I don't have a lot of really relevant knowledge on future products. So if I say something, take it with a grain of salt. So if I'm say the color blue, you're thinking sky blue, I'm thinking royal blue, ends up being blue cheese.
Of course.
What's really interesting right now is that the replication world has been changing a lot. There's a lot of stuff you're going to see. I believe it was just announced last week on replica groups, and there's more stuff coming there. Replication, I think, is what really forged MySQL for a lot of organizations. The idea that it was easy to basically have two or more copies of your data. I used to be a Postgres DBA, and doing things with triggers to copy things from here to there onto another server was just absolutely miserable. Postgres has
It
gotten a
works
lot.
until it doesn't. I can speak from experience. Like
Yeah.
one morning you realize your trigger has been failing silently for the last 4 hours while you were asleep, and now you need the ticket to Mexico and a new identity.
Well, I'm envious. 4 hours of sleep. I would never really get that much sleep when I was at a Postgres DBA. Well, it's one of the things where we're doing a lot of things like the clone plugin, where you don't have to basically do the MySQL dump and SCP it over and rebuild it. Uh, a lot of the things in replica set were borrowed from our InnoDB cluster to make everything easier for you to do replication. Global transaction IDs, which I believe came out in 5.5 or 5.6. The idea that you're not actually looking for a file pointer on system A and trying to reference that on system B and set all that up to get it to work. It's now much easier than it was a long time ago. To give you an example, many years ago with MySQL 4.1, I was replicating from uh, machine A to machine B to machine C, and occasionally B would hiccup, and just trying to get things going to C was always a nightmare. There are ways to do that now with things we've announced in the past year that make it much easier. You can actually give the replica a list of machines to listen to. So if machine A goes away or machine B goes away, C knows to listen to the other one. So, um,
Nice.
yeah.
So how's good old my ISM doing?
Um,
My friend my ISM.
it's doing okay. Oracle's putting the majority of our money into InnoDB. Why? Because it's transactional. It's what our customers are using heavily. And my early professional career was a lot of time on ISAM files on DEX systems. Digital Equipment Corporation was an amazing computer company that couldn't manage its way into this century, but they had some amazing ideas and some amazing software. And MySQL has always been a favorite of mine, but the idea that you have to lock the entire table, just not the row you're interested in, and that always bothered me. And when InnoDB came along, that was a godsend for many of us because suddenly we could have multiple people changing the database on different sections with no problem. The InnoDB team, I follow their conversations on Slack and the stuff they're working on. I can't really go into it. I don't want to steal their thunder when it comes out 6 weeks, 6 months, 6 years from now. But a lot of the work they do to make sure that things are done right and things get done consistently is amazing. And
Sure.
there some computer scientists told me, some things are actually fairly simple, like operating systems. It's all the stuff you have to do on the periphery of it, like getting the optimizer or the storage engine on a database running, or a good scheduler that are the difficult things. But the basic stuff of operating systems are fairly simple. So to see these guys go through the quality checks that they're doing and the way they review each other's work makes me feel very happy that 15 years from now, we'll still be talking about InnoDB.
Fantastic. Yeah, I ask because like most of, if not everyone, I started with my ISM, right? I don't think it was there was an alternative at the time. Like or InnoDB was around probably almost at the same I don't really
Yeah.
remember. But
Well,
yeah,
InnoDB was actually a third-party piece of software that was built on top of MySQL that was distributed with MySQL. I forget what version. I know it was there in 4, but I'm not sure if it was there in any of the earlier versions. I'd have to go back and look. But ironically, what happened to InnoDB that made people go, "Oh my God," was that Oracle bought InnoBase OI, the company that made
mhm.
InnoDB, and a lot of people were going, "Oh my God, this is proof that Oracle's trying to kill MySQL." Well, that was at least 15 years ago. So,
Yeah, there's plenty. Again, if Oracle is conspiring to kill MySQL, is not working, they need to fire whoever is in charge of the conspiracy because it's clearly not working. It's
well, ironically, with our new HeatWave product, we have Larry Ellison talking about how great it is to have MySQL, and we just might end up being the tail of the dog wagging the dog. But there's a lot of great stuff out there, and the performance is amazing. So we caught a lot of eyes at headquarters. So I think MySQL's done very well by Oracle, and we're going to do Oracle very well by our product.
for sure. Yeah, I think that's a fair thing to say. It's been great so far. Like again, I am a longtime user. I've gone back to MySQL after a while of using Postgres, and I like it more than Postgres for a few things. It's really really interesting. Cool. So, well, yeah. Aside from the database caller question, I think the obligatory question for someone in your position is how. So, what's the funniest thing you've heard asked?
Um, how do I keep the government from looking at my database on my laptop?
But how do you?
How do you keep the government from looking at the database on my laptop?
No, I mean, how do you like? Now I want to know.
Basically, if this was just a person who was literally installing MySQL on a laptop who was very, very concerned that the government was just going to somehow through the ether pick up everything off her database. And I told her, well, you're going to set a password on here. It's going to be a password that only you know. For someone who really wants to dig in there, that's going to take them a lot of work and effort? And are you really going to save anything that super secret on your laptop? So,
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, that is a that's an interesting question. So, the government. Why
yeah.
does the government care about someone's weird development database somewhere in where in the world is your database kind of thing? Like, why does the government actually want to know? Well, we'll
Yeah.
never know, right?
Yeah.
Cool.
But but
So,
but I'll go to shows and I'll get all sorts of. Well, I used to go to shows and get run into folks with all sorts of questions. Um, I can't remember any right now that are extremely shocking or weird
well,
or funny.
that database caller is going to be something that haunts me for a long time. Like, because it makes your brain stop for a second. Like, I think it happened to you too when you read it the first time. Like, ooh, yeah. So wait, because it feels like you haven't fully understood the question as a technical person. Like, there might be something here that means something in this context, but I can't feel fully grasp it, and you don't want to answer right away because it sounds like you might say something foolish, right? No, no, wait. Okay, you're right. So database caller means it's some kind of permission scheme. I don't know. There's the Unix world. There's a lot of things going that are weird. So, but yeah. So I'm gonna go. Actually, what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna go to Evan, our CTO, and just ask him flat out right now after a call. What caller should I create? I'm building a new demo application, which is gonna be a cool clone of an audio room product, and I'm gonna ask him what. Hey, Evan, what caller should I make the database? I'll let you know what comes out of that.
Well, I was hoping when I was reading that some Richard Feynman esque thought would come through my mind and revolutionize the entire computer industry, but nah, didn't happen.
Mm, sorry, guys. Well,
No, no,
Dave, it
no.
was
I have worked for companies where you're literally sitting there looking on the screen and going, "Oh, that red's not Pantone 440. It's actually 441. We need to change everything. Go back and redesign the entire program." But uh,
well.
anyone who's
I
done
mean,
front end work will realize that happens too much.
yeah, it happens all the time. Great. So, well, Dave, thank you so much for
Thank you,
being with us
Luca.
today. And it was a very fun chat about how such a large community works. We manage the Frisbee community. It's large, but it's not the size of MySQL, right? And you got your fair share of weird people on your end, like we do. So, thank you for taking time away from your weird people to talk with another type of weird people, which is me. And, well, Dave Stokes, a community manager from MySQL at Oracle, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, sir. Have a good one.
And everybody else, I see you next week. Don't leave.
Okay.
I have